You're one step from being detained. Do you understand me? One step. Officer Ryan Brooks grabbed Jack Harlan by the lapel of his dress white jacket, his fist tightening right over the row of medals, his knuckles pressed into the Navy Cross, the Silver Star. Each one earned over decades of service and sacrifice. Then he twisted the fabric hard as if the honors meant nothing. Jack didn't move or flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there in his brilliant white uniform, calm and unshaken as the tension pressed in around him. What Ryan Brooks didn't know was that he was grabbing the lapel of a man whose phone contained the direct personal number of the highest-ranking officer in the United States Navy. Before I go on, drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The mirror didn't lie. Jack Harlan had learned that a long time ago. Mirrors never did. They showed you exactly what was there, nothing more, nothing less. And what was there on this particular morning was a man in a hotel bathroom in Woodbridge, Virginia, putting on the most important thing he had ever worn, his navy dress whites. He started with the jacket, always the jacket first. He lifted it from the hanger with both hands, the way you'd lift something sacred, and slid his arms into the sleeves slowly. The fabric was brilliant white, pressed the night before, not a single crease out of place. He had seen to that himself. He always did. Then came the medals. He lined them up on the bathroom counter before he pinned a single one. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, 3 others that most people wouldn't recognize, but that every person who had ever served would understand immediately. He picked up each one carefully, placed it exactly where it belonged. His hands moved with the kind of precision that doesn't come from practice. It comes from years, from experience that leaves marks on a man inside and out. Speaking of marks, his hands were scarred, both of them. The right one had a long ridge of raised skin running from the base of his thumb to his wrist, a souvenir from a rope that had snapped during a descent in Afghanistan. The left had 2 fingers that didn't bend all the way anymore, courtesy of a mountain pass and a firefight that had no business lasting as long as it did. His knuckles were thick. His palms were rough. These were not the hands of a man who had lived an easy life, but they were steady. They had always been steady. He checked his reflection one final time. The jacket sat perfectly. Every ribbon was aligned. The medals caught the bathroom light and held it. He stood straight, 6'2" of absolute stillness, and he looked himself in the eye, satisfied. "You look like a painting." He turned. His daughter Claire was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame in her Sunday best, a deep navy dress, hair pinned up, eyes already soft with something she was trying not to show. She was a brilliant pre-law student at Georgetown University, and she had her mother's face and his eyes. The combination had always struck him as the most remarkable thing he had ever had anything to do with. "Paintings don't move," he said. "They just endure." She smiled at that barely, but it was there. He put on his cover, his white officer's cap, and adjusted it with 2 fingers until it was exactly level. He took one last look at the mirror. The Navy Cross ceremony was set to begin soon. He had plenty of time. He was early. He was always early. Old habit, one that had saved his life more than once. They drove south on I-95 with the windows cracked and the radio off. The morning was already warm. One of those Virginia summer days that shows up without any warning and reminds you it means business. The sky was a wide, clean blue. American flags appeared along the roadside as they got closer, hanging from poles stretched across storefronts, standing at attention in front of a VFW hall they passed just outside of town. Claire watched the scenery move past her window. Jack kept his eyes on the road. Neither of them talked much. They didn't need to. That was something they had always shared, the ability to sit together without filling the space. Some people couldn't do that. Jack had always thought it said something important about a person, whether they could handle quiet, whether they trusted it, he trusted it. The Woodbridge Veterans Memorial appeared on the right, wide iron gates set back from the road, a long paved path lined with headstones as far as the eye could see. White marble, row after row after row, the kind of sight that put things in perspective fast. Jack pulled into the parking lot and cut the engine. He stepped out into the heat. His dress whites caught the sunlight immediately, bright and sharp, impossible to miss. Ahead of them, beyond the iron fence, the honor guard was already in position. White gloves, perfect posture, flags waiting to move. Jack looked at the gate. He set his jaw. He walked forward. The access road was a simple stretch of pavement running parallel to the memorial's iron fence connecting the parking lot to the main entrance gate. Jack had walked roads like this many times. Short, flat, direct. He and Claire crossed it side by side, moving toward the gate at an easy pace, the honor guard visible just beyond the fence ahead of them. That was when the voice came. "Hey!" Jack didn't stop. Not yet. Voices called out at events like this all the time. Logistics people, coordinators. It didn't necessarily mean him. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" That one he couldn't ignore. He stopped and turned. Back a ways, standing at the edge of the road near a mounted sign that read, "Authorized personnel only," was a police officer. A white male with thick shoulders and a jaw that looked like it had been set in concrete. His uniform was Woodbridge PD, navy blue badge catching the sun. His name tag read, Brooks. He was not moving toward them. He was standing with his thumbs hooked in his belt, looking at Jack the way a man looks at something he's already decided is a problem. "Roads closed," Brooks said. "Get back on the sidewalk." Jack kept his voice level. "We're here for a ceremony. It starts soon. I don't care what you're here for. This road is closed to foot traffic. Sidewalk's right there." Jack reached into the breast pocket of his jacket slowly, deliberately, and produced his military identification card. He held it out. "Master Chief Jack Harlan, United States Navy, retired. I'm an honoree at this event." Brooks looked at the card the way you'd look at a receipt you didn't ask for. His eyes dropped to it for a second. Then he looked back up. "Step back," he said, "both of you." Something shifted in the air around them. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but people nearby felt it. A couple walking toward the gate slowed down. Two men in veterans' caps exchanged a glance. Claire's hand tightened around the strap of her purse. Jack put the ID back in his pocket. He did not step back. "Sir," he said, "I am attending an official United States Navy ceremony on these grounds. My name is on the program. I'd ask you to let us through." Brooks took 3 steps forward, closing the distance, getting into the space that in any other context would make most people retreat. He was a man who understood the geometry of intimidation. He had used it before. He was using it now. "What I'm hearing," Brooks said, his voice dropping just enough to feel like a threat, "is a lot of words from somebody who doesn't know when to stop talking." "I know exactly when to stop talking," Jack said. "This isn't that moment." Brooks's jaw tightened. A muscle twitched below his left eye. He glanced down at Jack's chest, at the medals, the ribbons, the rows of decoration that represented a quarter-century of service, and something moved across his face. Not respect, not recognition, something else entirely, something that looked a lot like irritation. On a bench near the fence, half hidden by a cluster of people, an elderly woman named Eleanor Patterson sat very still. She was a retired schoolteacher from the area. She had come to watch today's ceremony from outside the gates because she liked to honor veterans when she could. She had a cup of sweet tea in one hand. She put it down quietly, reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, raised it. She had seen this before. She knew what it looked like. She pressed record. Brooks stepped closer to Jack, close enough that there was almost no space left between them. His voice went flat and hard. "You want to keep playing this game? Fine. But I am telling you right now, you do not walk this road, not until I say so. You got that?" Claire stepped forward. "He showed you his ID. I'm not talking to you." Brooks snapped, not even looking at her. Jack moved 1 step to the left, putting himself back between Brooks and his daughter. A quiet, automatic move, the kind a man makes without thinking about it. Brooks pointed, his finger aimed directly at Jack's chest. At the medals, at the ribbons, at every piece of hard-earned metal pinned to that brilliant white jacket. "I don't care what you've got pinned to you," he said. "You move when I tell you to move." The crowd had gone completely still. Nobody breathed. Then Brooks grabbed him, one hand, fist closing around the lapel of Jack's dress white jacket just below the collar, knuckles pressing against the Navy cross, against the silver star, against years of service that this man had decided in this moment meant absolutely nothing. Claire made a sound, sharp, involuntary, like air leaving a punctured tire. 2 people nearby raised their phones. Someone said, "Oh my God," in a low voice. The honor guard behind the gate had gone rigid, white-gloved hands at their sides, eyes forward, trained not to move. But their eyes moved, every one of them. Jack did not move. He did not pull back. He did not raise his hands. He did not raise his voice. He stood exactly where he was and looked at Ryan Brooks with an expression that was impossible to read and impossible to look away from. It was the face of a man who had been in rooms and valleys and corridors and burning buildings where the stakes were so much higher than this, that this almost didn't register. Almost. "Take your hand," Jack said quietly, "off my uniform." Brooks tightened his grip. The fabric pulled. A ribbon shifted slightly out of alignment. "You're one step from being detained. You understand me? One step." The crowd was a held breath. Nobody moved. Eleanor Patterson's phone stayed up, steady as a rock, capturing every second. Jack looked at Brooks for a long moment, then slowly enough that Brooks could see every movement and choose to react. He reached into his breast pocket. Brooks's body tensed. His free hand dropped toward his belt. Jack produced a cell phone, nothing else, just a phone. He dialed a number from memory, no hesitation. He had called this number a handful of times over the years. He knew it the way he knew his own service number. 2 rings. Bill. His voice was calm, conversational almost. "It's Jack. I'm outside the gate. Your man out here has his hand on my jacket." He listened for a moment. Then he lowered the phone from his ear and extended it toward Brooks. "He'd like to speak with you." Brooks stared at the phone. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. The smug satisfaction of a man who thought he was about to watch someone embarrass themselves. He reached out with his free hand and took it. He put it to his ear, still holding Jack's lapel. "Yeah." His voice was flat, confident. The voice of a man who figured this was some relative, some friend, trying to throw weight around. "This is Officer Brooks, Woodbridge PD." "Who am I speaking with?" The voice on the other end answered. The color left Ryan Brooks's face, not gradually, all at once, like someone had opened a drain. "Admiral Bill Hargrove, Chief of Naval Operations, 4 stars, the highest-ranking officer in the United States Navy." His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried the absolute, unmistakable authority of a man who had commanded operations in multiple theaters of war and had never once needed to repeat himself. He told Brooks to release the Master Chief right now and to remain exactly where he was until further notice. That was all. Brooks's hand opened. The lapel fell free. He stood there holding the phone like it had turned into something he didn't recognize, like he couldn't quite remember how he'd gotten it or what it was for. His mouth opened slightly, closed. He looked at Jack, then at the phone, then at Jack again. Jack reached out and took the phone back. "Thank you, Bill." He ended the call and slid the phone into his breast pocket. Then he reached up with 2 fingers and straightened the ribbon that Brooks had shifted out of alignment. He took his time with it. Got it exactly right. Then he looked at Brooks one final time, one single nod, not triumphant, not mocking, just acknowledgement, the kind a man gives when a matter has been settled. He turned and walked through the gate. Behind him someone began to clap, then someone else, then several people at once. Not a roar, but something genuine, something that bubbled up because it couldn't be held down. Claire caught up to him in quick steps and grabbed his arm with both hands. She was shaking. He could feel it through his jacket sleeve. He was not shaking. He walked forward, steady as he had always been, into the grounds of the memorial, toward the ceremony, toward the moment that today had always been meant for. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Bennett was waiting just inside the checkpoint. She was a compact woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed and precise, the kind of person who arrived early to every room she ever entered. She wore her Navy service uniform, khaki and gold, with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every thread of it. She and Jack had served together during a stretch in the early days of their careers. She knew him the way only people who have been through hard things together can know each other. She looked at him when he came through the gate, took in the set of his jaw, the steadiness of his walk, the barely visible tension behind his eyes. "You good?" she said. "I'm good," he said. She studied him for one more second. Then she pulled him into a firm embrace, the kind that said more than words could. She shook Claire's hand warmly, told her she looked beautiful, and then guided them both down the stone path toward the ceremony pavilion. People had gathered inside. The pavilion was open air, a wide stone platform framed by tall oak trees, surrounded on 3 sides by rows of white headstones that stretched back as far as the eye could see, row after row after row. Men and women who had given everything, the kind of sight that rearranged something inside you if you let it. Jack let it. Chairs had been arranged in neat rows facing a low wooden stage. Active duty personnel sat in uniform on the left. Veterans, family members, and civilian guests filled the right side. At the front, beside the podium, a small table held a dark presentation box. Jack knew what was inside it. He took his seat in the front row beside Claire. An officer handed him a printed program. He folded it in half without reading it and held it in his lap. Admiral Bill Hargrove took the podium at the scheduled time. He was a white-haired man, built like someone who had never fully left the field, 4 stars on his shoulder boards, a chest full of his own decorations. He stood at the podium without notes. He had not prepared remarks. What he said next, he said from memory, because it was not the kind of thing a man forgot. He spoke about Ramadi, a collapsing building on a street that didn't appear on any map they'd been given. 6 men trapped on the 2nd floor. Smoke coming up through the floorboards, seconds before the whole structure came down and 1 man who went back in. Hargrove didn't use military language. He didn't talk about tactical assessments or operational parameters. He said it plainly. Every one of us calculated the odds and made the same decision. We couldn't go back in. The math didn't work. He paused. Jack Harlan looked at the same math and got a different answer. He went back in anyway, and he brought all 6 of them out. He let that sit for a moment. I have given a lot of medals in my career, Hargrove said. I want you to understand something about this one. This is not a medal for following orders. This is a medal for the kind of character that cannot be manufactured, cannot be trained, can only be revealed. In a moment when everything is on the line, and the choice is yours alone to make. He stepped away from the podium. Jack stood. He walked to the stage with the same measured stride he had used all morning. Steady, unhurried, he stopped in front of Hargrove and stood at attention. Hargrove opened the presentation box. He lifted the Navy Cross, a dark blue cross on a white and blue ribbon, and pinned it to Jack's chest just above the row of decorations already there. He stepped back, saluted. Jack returned it. In the front row, Claire pressed 2 fingers to her mouth. Her shoulders shook once silently. She did not look away. The reception afterward filled the memorial hall with warm noise, handshakes, quiet conversations, a table of food. Nobody was really eating. Jack moved through the room, accepting every hand extended to him, answering every question with patience, posing for photographs with strangers who looked at him like he was something rare. He was standing near the far window, watching the honor guard outside begin to fold the flags when he felt someone come up beside him. Bennett. Her warm expression was gone. She spoke low. Jack, I need to show you something. Bennett pulled him into a quiet corner near the back of the hall, away from the handshakes and the warm noise and the people still buzzing from the ceremony. Away from all of it. She positioned herself with her back to the room. An old habit, the kind you develop when you don't want anyone reading your expression from across the space. Claire had noticed them move. She crossed the room without being asked and stood beside her father. Bennett looked at Jack, then at Claire, then back at Jack. Brooks filed a report, she said. Already. The noise of the reception continued behind them like nothing had happened. Glasses clinking, low laughter, someone telling a story that ended with the whole table smiling. Jack said nothing. He waited. It hadn't taken long, Bennett said. That's how long it took. While you were in there receiving the Navy Cross, he was outside writing it up. Somebody coached him. Had to have. The language was too clean, too fast. She reached into the pocket of her uniform jacket and produced her tablet. She pulled up the document and held it out. Jack took it. He read slowly, the way he did everything, deliberately, completely, without skipping a single word. The report described a non-compliant civilian who had aggressively entered a restricted access road despite repeated lawful instructions to stop. It described verbal threats directed at a law enforcement officer. It used the phrase, threatening posture twice. It described Brooks as having acted with restraint and professionalism under provocation. It did not mention the lapel. It did not mention the military ID. It did not mention the phone call. It was a work of careful, practiced fiction. Claire read over his shoulder. He could feel the heat coming off her. There's more, Bennett said. She took the tablet back and pulled up a second document, an internal routing slip. Donnelly fast-tracked it, Brooks's supervisor. Normally, a report like this sits in the queue for a while. This one escalated quickly. Why? Claire said. Bennett glanced at her. Donnelly's brother-in-law is running for the County Public Safety Review Board. The election is coming up, a case where an officer held the line against an aggressive civilian, even a veteran. That's useful. That's a campaign talking point. Jack handed the tablet back. His jaw was tight, not trembling, just set like concrete that had been poured and had cured completely. "The video," he said. Bennett nodded. "It went up online not long ago. Someone in the crowd posted it." She paused. Brooks's union rep was on the phone with the platform soon after. They flagged it as potentially doctored. "It's been suppressed pending review. You can't find it if you search for it." Claire made a sound that was not quite a word. She pressed her lips together and looked at the floor for a second. Then she looked back up. Bennett put the tablet away. She looked at Jack with the kind of expression that old teammates use when they have said everything useful and are simply standing with you now. "I'm sorry," she said. "I wanted today to be just today." "It was," Jack said. "It still is." He meant it. But there was something different in his voice now, something that hadn't been there at the podium or at the gate. It wasn't anger exactly, it was recognition. The recognition of a man who has identified a threat, assessed it clearly, without panic, without denial, and is now deciding what to do about it. He reached up and touched the Navy cross with 2 fingers, just briefly. Then he lowered his hand. Claire was watching him. She had been watching him the way she always did when something serious was happening, carefully, completely, the way you watch someone you are trying to learn from. "They're going to try to make you the story," she said. It wasn't a question. "They're going to try," Jack said. She looked at him for a long moment. Her chin came up slightly. Her voice was steady and quiet and absolutely certain. "Daddy, we fight this." He looked at his daughter, sharp as a blade, standing in the corner of a reception hall in her Sunday best with fire behind her eyes and not 1 ounce of retreat in her posture. He looked down at the Navy cross one more time. "Yes," he said. He said it the same way he said everything that mattered, without drama, without hesitation. "We do." They left the reception together, side by side, walking back out through the same gate he had walked through that morning. The honor guard was gone now. The flags had been folded. The memorial grounds were quiet in the afternoon heat. They had a long road ahead. Jack had never once been afraid of a long road. They drove back to Richmond that evening in the same quiet they had driven down in. But it was a different kind of quiet now. The morning's quiet had been calm, settled, the quiet of a man at peace with where he was going. This one had edges to it. This one had weight. Jack drove. Claire sat in the passenger seat with her phone in her lap, scrolling through legal databases, making notes in a small notebook she kept in her purse. She didn't stop the whole way home. He didn't ask her to. By the next morning, they were sitting across a conference table from Patricia Caldwell. Her office was on the 4th floor of a building in downtown Richmond, clean, organized, not fancy. The kind of office that belonged to someone who spent her money on preparation rather than appearances. Patricia herself looked exactly like that. In her early 60s, natural silver hair cut close, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white blouse, and she had the kind of stillness that came from having sat across from very powerful people for a very long time and having never once blinked first. She read Brooks's incident report without a word, all the way through. Then she set it down flat on the table and looked at Jack. "He's done this before," she said. "How many times?" "Jack said that I can document a few." She opened a folder and slid 3 separate incident summaries across the table. 3 prior complaints, all involving black men, all filed with nearly identical language, non-compliant, aggressive, threatening. You could practically copy and paste. She tapped the folder. Not one resulted in formal discipline. 2 were settled quietly before any hearing. 1 was dropped when the complainant stopped returning calls. Claire leaned forward. "How does that happen?" Patricia looked at her over the top of her glasses. "It happens because of the machine," she said. "And I want you both to understand exactly how it works. Because a lot of people go into this fight without understanding it, and they lose before they get started." She folded her hands on the table. Brooks files his report. The union assigns a rep quickly, which has already happened. The rep's job is one thing: protect the officer. They don't investigate. They construct. They take the report, clean up the language, and build a counter-narrative before you've even had time to process what happened to you. She paused. Then your complaint enters the formal pipeline: internal affairs, review boards, departmental hearings, all of which operate on their own timeline, months, sometimes longer. And while all of that is grinding along, the political moment passes, the public moves on. The pressure drops, and then very quietly, Brooks gets reassigned to a different sector, and the whole thing just disappears. The room was quiet. That's how it always works, Patricia said, every single time. Jack sat with that for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me about the other men." Patricia's expression shifted slightly. Something moved behind her eyes. She reached back into the folder. "There's one I want you to know about specifically," she said. "His name is Walter Jenkins, an older man, retired postal worker, long years of service with the USPS. Never missed a day, never had a disciplinary note in his file. Some time ago, Brooks stopped him outside a pharmacy on Maple Avenue." She paused. "Jenkins ended up in the hospital, 2 cracked ribs. Brooks' report said he fell while resisting." "And the hospital records," Claire said. "Don't match the police report," Patricia said flatly. "Not even close." "Did he press charges?" Jack asked. "He was going to." Then someone had a quiet word with him, told him that pursuing it could complicate his pension review. Nothing written down, nothing provable, just a conversation. She closed the folder. He backed down. He's been living with it ever since. Jack was still. His eyes had not moved from Patricia's face. "Where is he now?" he said. Patricia looked at him carefully, like she was measuring something. "Richmond," she said. "Not far from here." Jack pushed back his chair and stood up. He picked up his jacket from the back of the seat and put it on. He looked at Claire. "I'll be back by dinner," he said. Patricia watched him walk to the door. She had represented a lot of clients in her career. She had sat across from a lot of people in a lot of trouble. She had learned over the years to read a man by the way he moved when the stakes were real. Jack Harlan moved like a man who had already decided. The neighborhood was quiet in the early afternoon. Small houses set back from the street behind modest lawns, old oak trees throwing shade across the sidewalk, the kind of block where people had lived for decades and knew each other's cars. Jack parked at the curb and sat for a moment with the engine off, looking at the brick house at the end of the short driveway. A wind chime moved on the front porch. A pair of reading glasses sat on a small table beside the door. He got out and walked up. He knocked, footsteps inside, then silence, the particular silence of someone looking through a peephole, deciding. The door opened a crack, stopped by a chain, and a woman looked out at him. Small, in her 60s, eyes sharp with suspicion and something older than suspicion, something that had been earned over a lifetime of answering doors and not always knowing what was on the other side. "Can I help you?" she said. Her voice said she wasn't sure she wanted to. "My name is Jack Harlan," he said. "I'm looking for Walter Jenkins. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not a reporter. I'm a veteran, retired Navy, and I have something I need to talk to Mr. Jenkins about. It concerns Ryan Brooks." The name landed. He watched it land. The woman's eyes changed. The sharp suspicion didn't leave. It just moved aside to make room for something else, recognition. And behind that, the particular kind of weariness that comes from a wound that never fully healed. The door closed, the chain rattled, the door opened all the way. "Come in," she said. Walter was in the living room. He sat in a recliner near the window with a cane leaning against the armrest, a dark wood cane with a rubber tip worn smooth from use. He was smaller than Jack had imagined, not frail exactly, but reduced, like a man who had been a certain size for most of his life and had lost some of it somewhere along the way. His hair was white at the temples, and his hands resting on the armrests were the hands of a man who had worked hard for a long time. He looked at Jack, the way men of a certain age and experience look at strangers who show up with serious faces, measuring, waiting. "Sit down," he said. His voice was steady, quiet. Whatever he had lost in size, he had kept in composure. Jack sat on the couch across from him. Jenkins's wife, she had introduced herself as Martha, stood in the doorway to the kitchen with her arms crossed. She was not leaving. Jack didn't blame her. "You said Ryan Brooks," Jenkins said. "Yes, sir. What about him?" "I had an encounter with him at the ceremony at the Woodbridge Veterans Memorial. He put his hand on my uniform, filed a false report afterward. The department is backing him up." He paused. "Patricia Caldwell is my attorney. She told me what happened to you some time ago. I came to hear it from you directly." Jenkins looked at him for a long moment. The wind chime on the porch made a soft sound through the screen door. Martha hadn't moved. Then Jenkins started talking. He had been outside the pharmacy on Maple Avenue one afternoon, picking up his blood pressure medication. He was walking back to his car when Brooks pulled up beside him and told him to stop. No explanation. Just stop. When Jenkins asked why, Brooks got out of the car. When Jenkins asked a second time, things escalated fast. He ended up on the pavement. He wasn't sure exactly how it happened. It was fast, and then it was over, and he was looking up at the sky with something wrong in his side. He woke up in the hospital the next morning with 2 cracked ribs and a story that didn't match the police report in a single meaningful detail. His voice broke once when he described calling Martha from the hospital room. When he described the way she sounded when she picked up, he stopped talking for a moment and looked out the window at the oak tree in his front yard. Martha looked at her shoes. Jack waited. He didn't feel the silence. He let the man have it. When Jenkins looked back, something in his face had shifted. Harder, clearer. For some time now, he said, I've been carrying this thing because some man told me quietly, nicely, that talking about it might cause problems with my pension. So I stayed quiet. He exhaled slowly through his nose. I stayed quiet. And it hasn't done me a bit of good. Jack leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. His voice was low and direct. I'm not staying quiet, he said, and I could use a witness who isn't. Jenkins studied him, the way you study a road before you decide to walk it. You that man, he said. Are you actually that man? Jack held his gaze without blinking. I am, he said. Jenkins's hand moved across the armrest and extended toward him. Jack reached out and took it. They shook once. Firm, brief, the kind of handshake that means something. Martha uncrossed her arms in the kitchen doorway. Outside, the wind chime moved again in the afternoon breeze. Days passed. Jack spent them the way he spent most hard stretches, methodically. He called Patricia every morning. He reviewed documents in the evening. He slept when he could and didn't waste energy on the hours when he couldn't. He had learned a long time ago that anger without direction was just fuel without an engine. It didn't take you anywhere. It just burned. A few mornings later, he drove to Claire's apartment in Church Hill. She had a small place on the second floor of a converted row house, bookshelves on every wall, case law binders stacked on the kitchen counter, a corkboard above her desk covered in color-coded notes. She had set up her laptop on the coffee table and pulled up the local news stream. She handed him a cup of coffee without a word. They sat on the couch together and watched. The segment ran for a short time. The anchor introduced it carefully. A dispute between a local law enforcement officer and a decorated Navy veteran at a Woodbridge memorial ceremony has sparked conversation this week. Conversation. That was the word they chose. The footage from Eleanor Patterson's video played for a brief clip before cutting to a split screen. Brooks's union representative on the left, a news desk commentator on the right. The union rep was smooth, well-dressed, the kind of man who had done this exact thing many times before and had stopped feeling anything about it. He called the video incomplete and taken out of context. He said Officer Brooks had been following standard perimeter protocol and had shown considerable restraint throughout the encounter. He said the union stood fully behind its officer and that any characterization of misconduct was premature and irresponsible. Then the segment cut to a recorded statement from Sergeant Paul Donnelly. He stood outside the Woodbridge PD building in his full uniform reading from a prepared card. The department stood behind Officer Brooks. Standard protocol had been followed. The matter was under internal review. He did not say Jack's name, not once. He didn't need to. The framing had already done that work. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read Officer in dispute at memorial event. Dispute like it was a disagreement between neighbors about a fence line. Claire closed the laptop. She sat back and pressed her hands flat against her thighs the way she did when she was controlling something. They're making it equal, she said. Like there are 2 reasonable sides. That's the strategy, Jack said. Make it complicated. Once it's complicated, people stop being certain. Once they stop being certain, the moment passes. Claire picked up her phone and drafted a post, a clear, factual account of what had happened at the gate with a link to the partially restored Patterson video. She hit publish. By that afternoon, it had gained some traction, a handful of shares, nothing that broke through. The algorithm had no interest in small fires. That same morning, Patricia filed the formal civil rights complaint with the Woodbridge PD Internal Affairs Division. She called Jack to tell him it was submitted. She also told him something else. The investigator assigned to the complaint was a longtime department veteran named Kyle Harrison. He and Brooks had worked the same patrol sector for years. They had been photographed together at the department's annual banquet multiple times. It was all public record, all findable. Patricia had found it quickly. For a couple of days, nothing came back. Then the city council office called Patricia's office with an invitation. Would Jack Harlan be willing to speak at the next open public session? Patricia called Jack immediately. She said it cautiously. It could be a genuine opening, a chance to put his account on public record in a formal civic setting. Jack said yes. Soon after, the council office called back. The invitation was withdrawn, pending review. They were sorry for any confusion. Patricia called that evening while Jack was eating dinner alone at his kitchen table. She didn't waste time. "The complaint is stalled," she said. "Harrison hasn't moved it an inch. I expected this, but I wanted you to hear it from me directly." She paused. "We need pressure from outside the system entirely, someone whose name carries federal weight." Another pause. Would Admiral Hargrove make a public statement? Jack set down his fork. He stared at the wall across from him for a moment. Then he said, "I'll call him in the morning." He picked his fork back up. He finished his dinner. He washed the dish and put it away. Then he went to his study, sat down, and started writing out everything he needed to say. He called it an appropriate hour the next morning, not because he thought Hargrove would be asleep. The man had been waking up early since his early days and had never once broken the habit. Jack called when it felt right for a hard conversation, early enough to be serious, late enough to be respectful. The line rang twice. "Jack." Hargrove's voice was the same as always, low, measured, the kind of voice that had learned over decades to carry authority without volume. "I've been expecting your call." "Then you've seen the news coverage," Jack said. "I have, and the report Brooks filed, that too." A brief pause. "Rachel Bennett forwarded it to me through proper channels. I've read every word." His voice tightened almost imperceptibly on the last two words. "Almost. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Jack said. Because he was. "I'm calling to give you professional courtesy. My attorney is pushing this forward. It's going to escalate. Your name is going to come up in coverage probably soon. I wanted you to hear that from me before you heard it somewhere else." "I appreciate that," Hargrove said. Then he stopped talking. The silence stretched out. Jack knew silences. He had spent a career reading them in mission briefings, in debriefs, in the particular quiet that fell over a room when a commanding officer was about to say something nobody wanted to hear. This one had a shape to it, a weight. "Bill," Jack said. Hargrove exhaled long and slow. "Jack, I have been advised by legal counsel, Navy counsel, not to engage publicly with this matter at this time." The words came out carefully, like they had been chosen and recited and chosen again. "The service has appropriations hearings in front of the House Armed Services Committee coming up," Hargrove continued. "There are people on both sides of that committee who would use my involvement in a local law enforcement controversy to make those hearings about something other than the Navy's operational needs. I have been strongly encouraged to maintain a public distance from the situation until the formal process plays out." Jack said nothing. "I'm sorry," Hargrove said, and he meant it. The word carried real weight, the weight of a man who understood exactly what he was saying and didn't feel clean about it. "I understand," Jack said. "Jack, Bill, I understand. I mean that." He kept his voice even, neutral. "Thank you for being straight with me." He ended the call. He put the phone face down on his desk and sat with his hands flat on the wood surface on either side of it. The study was quiet. Morning light came through the single window at an angle, cutting across the floor in a long, pale stripe. Somewhere outside, a car started and drove away. Jack sat very still and thought about what he now understood. It wasn't just Brooks. It was never just Brooks. Brooks was one man, small in the grand scheme of things, replaceable, the kind of man the system produced reliably and protected automatically because the system needed men like him to function the way it wanted to function. What Jack was actually fighting was the entire structure that surrounded that one man, the union, the department, the political machinery attached to the department, the media dynamic that flattened the story into two equal sides, the internal complaint process with its assigned investigator who had lunch with the subject of the complaint. And now even the institution that Jack had given decades of his life to was keeping its distance, protecting its budget, protecting its position. He had known this intellectually since Patricia had laid it out at her conference table. But knowing something intellectually and sitting alone in a quiet room, feeling the full weight of it, were two different things. He got up. He walked to the garage. He went inside and sat on the workbench in the dark with his hands on his knees for a while. Not spiraling, not collapsing, just letting himself feel the size of the thing he was up against. You didn't fight something this big by pretending it was small. You fought it by seeing it clearly and deciding to move anyway. He got up. He went back inside. Claire was at the kitchen table with her laptop open, surrounded by printed pages and highlighted notes. She had let herself in with her key. She looked up when he came in. Something in his face told her everything. She reached over and turned her laptop toward him. "Sit down, Daddy," she said quietly. "Tell me what he said. Then I want to show you what I've been working on." He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "Tell me what you found," he said. The video broke through, not the clipped version the local news had used, the full, unedited recording from Eleanor Patterson. Steady, clear, capturing every word and every second from the moment Brooks called out across the access road to the moment Jack walked through the gate. It surfaced on a national veterans advocacy platform called Standing Watch, and within hours a retired Marine general with a large following had shared it with 4 words: "This is what they do." By that evening, it had gained massive attention. By the next morning, even more. The national press arrived like weather. Suddenly, everyone had Jack Harlan's name in their mouths. His service record went public. Decades, multiple combat tours, the Navy Cross pinned recently at the very ceremony Brooks had tried to keep him from. The story assembled itself and spread faster than anyone could shape it. Jack's phone rang so many times he turned it face down and let Patricia handle the press inquiries. She called him at noon, and for the first time since this began, her voice had something lighter in it. "The city attorney's office just called," she said. "They want to discuss a resolution." Jack sat up straighter. "What kind of resolution?" "Formal departmental apology. Brooks suspended with pay pending investigation." "The false incident report expunged from the record." She paused. "It's not everything, but it's a crack in the wall. Jack, that office does not call unless they're feeling real pressure." That evening, Jack drove to Patricia's office. Claire was already there when he arrived, sitting across the conference table with her notebook open. Patricia had ordered food, containers of rice and chicken stacked in the center of the table. And for one evening, the 3 of them sat together and let themselves feel something that had been in short supply for the past couple of weeks. Relief. Actual, genuine relief. They talked through the terms. They talked through what an apology from the department would mean, not just for Jack, but for the formal record, for any future cases, for the paper trail that Patricia was building with the meticulous patience of someone constructing a foundation rather than just winning an argument. Claire asked sharp questions. Patricia answered every one of them directly. By evening, when Jack drove home, the weight in his chest had loosened by several degrees. He pressed the dress whites that night out of habit, hung them back in the garment bag. He slept. The story ran the next morning. He saw it on his phone before he was fully awake. A regional outlet, the kind of publication that existed primarily to service a particular point of view. The headline sat on the screen like something thrown at him. Navy Cross recipient has violent past. Records reveal decorated veteran's history of aggression. He sat up. He read it. At a young age, before he ever enlisted, Jack had been involved in a bar fight, a single incident, a misdemeanor charge that had been fully expunged from his record decades ago. It was gone. Legally, officially, completely gone, because that was what expungement meant. It meant it did not exist. Except that now it did because someone had found it. Someone with access to sealed records had reached in and pulled it out and handed it to a reporter. By mid-morning, the viral video was being argued about rather than watched. Comment sections filled with people who had never served a day in their lives debating whether a man with an old misdemeanor could really be trusted. Brooks's union held a press conference at noon. The representative was practiced and calm and said that Brooks had filed his report in good faith, that the video did not represent the full context of the exchange, and that the rush to judgment against a dedicated law enforcement officer was itself a form of injustice. The city attorney's office called Patricia in the afternoon. The resolution conversation was on hold. Jack was sitting at his kitchen table reading the union statement when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. "Walter," he answered. Jenkins's voice was low and tired, older sounding than it had been at the kitchen table. "Jack," he said, "I got to tell you something and I need you to understand. I am sorry." Jack went still. "Somebody from the police union called my daughter's employer yesterday." Jenkins said her school. Just asking questions, they said. Real polite. But she called me last night and she was scared, son. She was scared. His voice cracked at the edges. I can't be your witness. I can't do that to her. The kitchen was completely silent. I understand, Jack said. Walter, I understand. He ended the call. He set the phone on the table. Claire was across from him. She had been there all morning. She watched her father's face and saw something she had never seen there before. Just for a moment. Just a flicker. She pulled her laptop closer. Her voice was very quiet. Daddy, she said, they broke the law. Jack looked at his daughter across the kitchen table. She had her laptop open and a stack of printed pages beside it, highlighted, tabbed, annotated in the tight, precise handwriting she had inherited from nobody in particular and developed entirely on her own. She had been building toward this moment for days. He could see it now. The careful, methodical way she turned the laptop to face him told him everything about how long she had been waiting for the right moment to say what she was about to say. A sealed expungement record, she said, cannot be accessed by law enforcement for the purpose of public disclosure. Not in Virginia, not anywhere in this country. She pushed a printed page across the table toward him. Virginia law on unauthorized disclosure of expunged records. It's not a policy violation, Daddy. It's not a department rule. Somebody bent. It is a criminal statute. Whoever pulled your record and handed it to that reporter committed a crime. Jack looked at the page. He read it. All of it. Then he read it again. Who has access to sealed records through law enforcement databases? He said certified officers through a restricted state portal. She pulled up another tab. Every access is logged, every single one. The system records who opened it, when, and from which terminal. That log is not sealed. That log is discoverable. She sat back. They didn't just overreach, they left a trail. The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Jack had spent decades in environments where the difference between a good plan and a catastrophic one came down to one thing, whether the other side had made a mistake you could use. He had learned to spot those mistakes quickly, to assess them without emotion, to understand exactly what they meant and exactly what they made possible. This was a mistake, a significant one. He picked up his phone and called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. It was evening, and she answered like she had been sitting next to the phone. Claire found something, Jack said. Tell me. He put the phone on speaker and set it on the table between them. Claire leaned forward and walked Patricia through it. The statute, the access logs, the chain of custody that the leak had created. Her voice was clear and organized. She cited the law from memory before she even looked at the page. When Claire finished, Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, How long have you been working on this? Since the story ran, Claire said. A couple of days. Another pause. Longer this time. I need to tell you both something, Patricia said. Her voice had shifted. Not louder, just more direct, the way a person sounds when they are done being careful with information. I have been in contact with the Virginia Attorney General's office for the past couple of days, quietly. Preliminary conversations, nothing formal yet. She paused. I was waiting. I needed the other side to do exactly what they just did. I needed a provable crime on the record before I moved, because without it, we had a civil complaint and a viral video. With it, we have a criminal investigation attached to a civil rights lawsuit. That changes everything about how much pressure this system is about to feel. Jack looked at the phone. You were waiting for them to overreach. They always do, Patricia said simply. People who have never faced real consequences believe they never will. That belief makes them sloppy. A brief pause. I'll be on the phone with the AG's office first thing tomorrow morning. I'm going to need Claire's research. All of it formatted and sourced. It'll be in your inbox by midnight, Claire said. Good. Then Patricia said something she didn't say often, something that wasn't part of her professional vocabulary. Claire, you would have made an excellent investigator. Claire looked at her father across the table. Something moved across her face. Not pride exactly, something quieter and more certain than pride. I'm going to be a better lawyer, she said. Jack looked at his daughter. Days of independent legal research spread across a kitchen table. A criminal statute cited from memory. A case that had been stalling suddenly cracked open by a young woman who had decided the situation required more than outrage. It required work. He felt the last trace of what had flickered across his face after Jenkins's call, that brief, unwelcome shadow, dissolve completely. It was gone. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers for just a moment. Then he stood up, picked up his coffee cup, rinsed it in the sink. "I'll let you work," he said. She was already typing. Patricia called early the next morning. Jack was already up, coffee made, sitting at the kitchen table with the printed Virginia statute in front of him, reading it again. Not because he didn't understand it, because understanding something completely and understanding something legally were two different things, and he wanted to know every word before the day started moving. "I've been on the phone since early," Patricia said. "The AG's office is interested, very interested. They're not making any formal announcements yet. They want to review Claire's documentation first, but the language from their side has shifted. This is no longer a preliminary conversation." "How long before they move?" Jack said. "Days." She paused. "There's something else. The Veterans Advocacy Group, Standing Watch, the platform that shared Patterson's video. They've retained an independent investigative team, retired JAG officers, and 2 journalists who specialize in law enforcement accountability. They've been running public records requests across jurisdictions for the past couple of days." Jack sat down his coffee. "What did they find?" Patricia took a breath, the kind of breath that precedes something significant. "Brooks wasn't from Woodbridge," she said. "He was transferred there some years back. He came from a smaller department in a neighboring county, about an hour west. While he was there, an excessive force complaint was filed against him, a young man. The complaint was serious enough that it should have gone to a formal hearing." She paused. It never did. Instead, the county settled quietly, paid the complainant, sealed the agreement, and offered Brooks a voluntary transfer in exchange for his resignation. Woodbridge PD hired him soon after. The kitchen was completely still. "They knew," Jack said. "They had reason to know," Patricia said carefully. "Whether they conducted a thorough background inquiry or chose not to look too hard, that's something a federal lawsuit will establish. But the paper trail exists. The transfer timeline exists. The gap between his resignation and his Woodbridge hire is short. That's not a coincidence. That's a transaction." Jack stood up from the table and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet. A neighbor's sprinkler moved in slow arcs across a front lawn. Ordinary, peaceful, the kind of morning that had no idea what was being said in kitchens like this one. "This isn't one bad officer." Jack said, "No," Patricia said. "It never was. Brooks is the symptom. The department is the disease. And now we have documentation of both." She let that sit for a moment. "I'm filing the federal civil rights lawsuit today. This afternoon, Section 1983, deprivation of rights under color of law. Named defendants are Brooks, Donnelly, and the city of Woodbridge." Jack turned from the window. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to be present at the filing," she said. "On the courthouse steps in your dress whites." He didn't hesitate. "What time?" "In the afternoon. Richmond Federal Courthouse. I'll be there, Jack." Her voice changed slightly, became more direct in a way that meant she was about to say something she had weighed carefully before saying, "What we're doing today is not just about you. You understand that the Jenkins case, the neighboring county transfer, the sealed record leak, we are building a case that establishes a pattern, a documented, provable pattern of misconduct enabled by institutional indifference. That is, how you don't just win. That is how you make it harder for this to happen to the next man." Jack was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. After he hung up, he went to the bedroom closet. He moved aside 2 hanging garment bags until he found the right one. He unzipped it slowly. The dress whites were exactly as he had left them, every fold deliberate, the fabric still brilliant white, the empty space above the breast pocket, where the navy cross now hung on its presentation box in his study. He lifted the jacket out carefully, checked every seam, every crease. He carried it to the bathroom and hung it on the back of the door where the steam from the shower would release any remaining stiffness from the fabric. Then he went to his study and opened the presentation box. He lifted the navy cross and held it in both hands for a moment. The dark blue cross, the white and blue ribbon, the weight of it, not heavy in ounces, but heavy in everything else. He was going to wear it today, not for a ceremony, for something more important. He called Claire. She answered before the first ring finished. "Clear your afternoon," he said. "It's time." He was putting on his dress whites when his phone rang. He had the jacket laid out on the bed, the navy cross sitting in its open box on the nightstand beside it. He was moving with the same careful precision he always brought to this. Each step deliberate, nothing rushed. When the phone lit up on the dresser, he looked at the screen. Admiral Bill Hargrove. Jack picked it up. Bill? Jack. A pause. Brief, like the man on the other end was making a final decision about something he had already mostly decided. I want to talk to you before today. I'm listening. I retained personal legal counsel recently. Hargrove said, private attorney. No Navy involvement, no institutional connection, entirely separate from my role in my uniform. His voice was steady and unhurried, the voice Jack remembered from briefings in difficult places. I submitted a voluntary sworn statement to the Virginia Attorney General's office this morning. Written and signed, it details what I heard during that phone call outside the memorial gate. Brooks's tone, his words, the physical contact with your uniform, my direct order, and his response to it. He paused. Every word of it is on record now. Jack sat down on the edge of the bed. Bill, I'm not finished. Not harsh, just direct. I also made some calls recently, quiet ones. The congressional liaison to the House Armed Services Committee is now aware that a Navy Cross recipient was physically accosted at a federal memorial event by local law enforcement who subsequently filed a false report characterizing him as the aggressor. A brief silence. I did not make that call officially. I made it as a man who has served this country for decades and knows which things cannot be allowed to simply disappear. Jack didn't speak for a moment. Outside his bedroom window, a car passed slowly on the street below. The ordinary world moving at its ordinary pace, completely unaware of the conversation happening inside this room. Your counsel advised you against all of this, Jack said. They did, Hargrove said strongly, repeatedly. He didn't sound bothered by that. I told them I didn't want to be protected from this one. The appropriations hearing will happen with or without my involvement in this situation, Hargrove said. And if there are members of that committee who want to use my defense of a decorated veteran against the Navy's budget, then I would genuinely like to watch them try. Something moved in his voice then, not anger, something older and quieter than anger. Conviction. The kind that had been sitting somewhere for a while, waiting for the right moment to stand up. Jack, I've given a lot of orders in my career. Some of them I'm proud of. Some of them I made peace with a long time ago. But I've never once given an order I was more certain about than the one I gave you years ago in Ramadi. I told you to stand down. I told you the math didn't work. A pause. You didn't listen. And 6 men came home because you didn't. Jack looked at the Navy Cross in its open box on the nightstand. I told my counsel something else, Hargrove continued. I told them that a man once went into a burning building for 6 of my people when every reasonable calculation said not to. The least I can do is pick up a phone and tell the truth about what I heard. Another pause. Shorter this time. That's not sacrifice, Jack. That's the absolute minimum. The room was quiet. Between 2 men who had served together, who had shared the particular silence of people who had been through things that most people would never understand. This silence was different from all the others. It was not uncomfortable. It was not heavy. It was the silence of something that had needed to be said finally being said, and both men knew it. Thank you, Bill, Jack said. Don't thank me, Hargrove said simply. Just win. Jack almost smiled at that. Yes, sir. See you on the other side of this. You will. He ended the call. He set the phone on the dresser and stood in the quiet of the room for a moment. Then he turned back to the bed, picked up his dress white jacket, and put it on. Sleeve by sleeve, he straightened the collar. He picked up the Navy Cross from its box and pinned it to his chest exactly where it belonged. Exactly level, exactly right. He picked up the garment bag. He walked out the door. The news broke in the morning. Jack was in Patricia's conference room when her phone lit up with the alert. She read it, set the phone face down on the table, and looked at him with the composed expression of someone who had expected this, but was still allowing herself one quiet moment of satisfaction. The AG's office has opened a formal criminal investigation, she said. Unlawful disclosure of sealed criminal records. It's official. She slid her laptop across the table. The press release was already on the screen. 2 paragraphs, tight and formal, the kind of language that government offices used when they wanted to say something serious without saying anything extra. It didn't need to say anything extra. The words criminal investigation carried everything. Within the hour, the database access logs had done exactly what Claire said they would do. They told the truth. Every access was recorded, time-stamped, terminal identified, Officer badged. The log showed one name accessing Jack Harlan's sealed expungement record days before the story ran. One name on one terminal at one specific time, Sergeant Paul Donnelly. Patricia got the call soon after. Donnelly had been placed on administrative leave pending criminal charges. She wrote the name on her legal pad, circled it once, and set down her pen. Later that morning, the Woodbridge chief of police held a press conference. Jack and Claire watched it on Patricia's laptop in the conference room. The chief stood outside the department building in his full uniform, a man who had said nothing for some time and now had no choice but to say something. He read from a prepared statement. His voice was flat. His eyes moved between the paper and a point somewhere above the assembled cameras that was definitely not any individual human face. Officer Ryan Brooks had been suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a full internal affairs investigation. The department was cooperating fully with the Virginia Attorney General's criminal inquiry. The department remained committed to the highest standards of professional conduct. He did not apologize. He did not say Jack's name. He took no questions. When it ended, Patricia closed the laptop. "Not enough," Claire said. "No," Patricia agreed, "which is exactly why we're filing this afternoon." The Richmond Federal Courthouse sat on Broad Street like it had been placed there specifically to make a point about permanence. Wide stone steps, tall columns, the kind of building that had seen 100 years of people climbing those steps with something urgent in their hands and something heavier in their chests. Jack climbed them in the afternoon in his full-dress whites, every medal, every ribbon, the Navy Cross centered on his chest, catching the afternoon sun. He walked with the same stride he always walked with, measured, unhurried, completely certain of each step. Patricia was beside him in a charcoal suit, her briefcase in one hand, the federal filing in the other. Claire walked on his left in her navy dress, her chin up, her eyes straight ahead. Cameras were already assembled at the bottom of the steps. Word had moved fast. Patricia stopped at the top of the steps and faced the press. She read the core of the filing in a clear, carrying voice. United States Code Section 1983, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, named defendants Officer Ryan Brooks, Sergeant Paul Donnelly, the city of Woodbridge. The lawsuit detailed the access road confrontation, the false incident report, the suppression of video evidence, the criminal leak of a sealed record, and the department's documented history of enabling Brooks's conduct by hiring him despite prior complaints and then protecting him against every subsequent one. When she finished, the questions came fast. She answered a few, then she stepped back. Jack did not speak to the press. He did not need to. He stood at the top of those courthouse steps in his dress whites, and he was still, the way he was always still. And that stillness said everything that needed saying. It said, "I'm not going anywhere." It said, "I was not wrong." It said, "I have been standing on harder ground than this for a very long time." Someone in the gathered crowd began to clap. Eleanor Patterson's interview ran on a national morning program the following day. She sat in a studio chair in her good blue blouse, composed and clear-eyed, and told the host exactly what she had seen and exactly why she had raised her phone. "I knew what I was seeing," she said. "I've been knowing what this looks like my whole life. I just finally had something in my hand to prove it." That evening, Jack's phone rang. Walter Jenkins. His voice was different, not tired this time, resolute. "I saw the photograph," Jenkins said quietly. "Your daughter told me to call." Jack said, "Take your time." Jenkins said, "I've taken enough time already." The sentencing happened sometime later in a Woodbridge County courtroom. Jack sat in the third row. Patricia was beside him, Claire on his left. Walter Jenkins sat 2 seats down, his cane resting against his knee, his back straight, his eyes forward. Martha held his hand. The courtroom was full, standing room only. Brooks was brought in first. He wore a gray suit that no longer fit him quite right, like a man who had lost something in the months since the arrest, something beyond weight. He did not look at the gallery. He looked at the floor, the table, his attorney's sleeve, anywhere that wasn't a face. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and the patient, immovable authority of someone who had presided over years of people attempting to avoid accountability, reviewed the sentencing memorandum without hurry, the federal civil rights conviction, the documented pattern of misconduct across 2 departments, the neighboring county complaint, Walter Jenkins's hospital records, the false incident report filed against Jack Harlan, the totality of it, assembled and presented in plain language that left no room for interpretation. She looked up at Brooks over her glasses. You used your badge, she said, not to protect the public, but to harm it repeatedly, deliberately, and you did so with the confidence of a man who believed he would never face this moment. She paused. You were wrong. Brooks was sentenced to several years in federal prison. He did not speak. He did not look up. He was led out of the courtroom by two marshals, and the door closed behind him with a sound that was not loud, but felt final in a way that quiet sounds sometimes do. Donnelly came next. He had aged visibly since his arrest. The careful political composure that had carried him through years of departmental maneuvering had collapsed somewhere between the indictment and today, and what was left looked smaller than the man who had stood outside the Woodbridge PD building reading from a prepared card. His attorney argued for leniency, cited his years of service, his family, his otherwise clean record. The judge listened to all of it. Then she noted that Donnelly had not simply bent a rule or made a mistake in judgment. He had deliberately accessed a sealed record, a legal protection that exists specifically to give people a second chance, and weaponized it against a decorated veteran in order to protect a corrupt officer and serve a political agenda. He had then used the reach of his position to intimidate a witness. Walter Jenkins's daughter had gone to work afraid. That, the judge said, was not a technicality. That was the abuse of power in its clearest form. Donnelly was sentenced to a few years in federal prison and permanent revocation of his law enforcement certification. He closed his eyes when the sentence was read. His wife, in the front row of the gallery, pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. The courtroom was very still. Then, from somewhere in the gallery, someone began to clap slowly at first. Then others joined, not wild or celebratory, something more serious than that. The sound of people who had waited a long time for something and were finally carefully allowing themselves to believe it had actually happened. Jack did not clap. He sat with his hands folded in his lap and looked at the empty space at the front of the courtroom, where both men had stood moments before. He did not feel triumph. He felt something quieter and more durable than triumph. He felt the particular weight of justice, real, documented, consequential justice, settling into the record permanently where it could not be expunged, reassigned, fast-tracked away, or quietly forgotten. He turned to Jenkins. The older man was looking straight ahead, his jaw set, his eyes bright with something he was holding carefully in place. His hand was still in Martha's. After a moment, he exhaled long and slow, and his shoulders came down slightly, like a man releasing a breath he had been holding for a long time. He turned to Jack. He didn't say anything. Neither did Jack. They didn't need to. The city of Woodbridge settled the federal civil rights lawsuit. The terms were substantial. Patricia had negotiated with the focus and patience of someone who understood that the number on the settlement document was not the most important part. The most important part was the consent decree attached to it, mandatory bias accountability training across the entire department, an independent civilian review board with actual authority, and a requirement that all future officer transfers include full disclosure of prior complaint histories. The training program had a name, the Jenkins Initiative. Walter Jenkins had submitted his written statement to the AG's office one morning, sitting at his kitchen table with Martha beside him and a pen in his hand that he held steady the whole way through. His daughter had taken the day off work to be there. When he finished signing, she put her hand on his shoulder and kept it there. He called Jack afterward. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Jack could hear it in his voice, the particular sound of a man who had put something down that he had been carrying for a very long time. The lunch with Admiral Hargrove had happened sometime after the settlement, a corner table at a quiet restaurant in Washington. No uniforms, no ceremony, just two men and bad coffee and a window looking out onto a street where nobody knew who they were or what they had been through together. They talked for hours about Ramadi, about the men who had come home from that building, about the ones who hadn't come home from other places, about what it meant to serve something larger than yourself, and what happened when the institution you served couldn't always live up to what it asked of you, about the difference between loyalty and silence, and how those two things got confused more often than they should. When they parted on the sidewalk outside, Hargrove shook Jack's hand and held it for a moment. "You were right not to walk away," he said. Jack said, "So were you." Claire appeared in the doorway of the study, same as the beginning, same doorway, same daughter, but not quite the same. There was something in her posture now that had been there before in seed form and had grown into something fuller and more certain. She leaned against the frame and looked at her father sitting at his desk with the Navy Cross open before him. "Georgetown Law accepted me," she said. The letter came this morning. Jack looked up. Same morning as the Donnelly indictment, she added. He looked at her for a long moment. That's not a coincidence, he said. That's alignment. She smiled at that. Came into the room and sat in the chair across the desk. She looked at the Navy Cross, then at him. How did you stay that calm? She said at the gate with his hand on your uniform. How did you just stand there? He thought about it. He took his time the way he always did with things that deserved it. When you've stood in places where the choice was life or death, he said, a man grabbing your lapel outside a ceremony is not the most frightening thing you've ever faced. He paused. The frightening thing is walking away, because if you walk away, it happens to the next man and the one after him, and it keeps happening until somebody decides their turn has come. He looked at the cross. Your grandfather couldn't fight it the way I fought it, he said. His grandfather couldn't fight it at all. Every generation, somebody has to pick up what the last one couldn't carry all the way to the end. He closed the presentation box gently. It was just my turn. Claire stood up and crossed the room. She put her arms around him from behind and held on. He reached up and put his hand over hers. They stayed like that for a moment, father and daughter, quiet in the evening light. Later, after Claire had gone, Jack went to the closet. He took the garment bag down from the hook. He unzipped it slowly and lifted the dress white jacket out with both hands, careful, deliberate, every fold respected. He checked each crease, smoothed one lapel with 2 fingers. Then he hung it back inside, zipped the bag closed, and returned it to its place. He had worn it for the ceremony. He had worn it for the fight. He would wear it again for whatever came next. Because a man like Jack Harlan did not retire from standing up. He simply pressed the uniform, hung it carefully, and waited for morning. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day. In the end, Jack Harlan's story reminds us of one of life's most powerful truths. Real courage isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a man in dress whites standing perfectly still while someone tries to tear his dignity away, refusing to flinch, refusing to back down. It's the quiet decision to protect what's right, even when the system itself seems stacked against you. Jack didn't fight for applause or revenge. He fought because he understood that if good people stay silent when injustice touches them, it will eventually touch everyone. His steady hands, scarred from years of service, and his daughter's fierce determination showed us that character isn't something you inherit. It's something you choose, day after day, even when the road gets long and heavy. This story leaves a deep ache in the chest and a fire in the spirit. It asks each of us, when your moment comes, when someone grabs the lapel of everything you've earned and tries to twist it into nothing, will you stand tall? Will you protect the next person coming behind you? True strength isn't about never feeling fear. It's about refusing to let fear make your choices for you. If Jack's journey moved you, if it stirred something honest and hopeful inside your heart, drop a comment below and tell me, what's one time in your life when standing your ground changed everything? I read every single one. And if you want more stories that honor courage, truth, and the quiet battles that shape who we become, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Tomorrow's story is one you truly don't want to miss. Thank you for being here. Stay strong, stay kind, and keep standing up.